So we're live. So here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. After the long hiatus, the year-long hiatus of Haunt Show Radio, we are back. We are live on our first ever, starting out with a bang, our first ever remote podcast where we're not all in the same room. So today I have with me Mr. Hutchins, my friend who works with me at the Haunt, and my partner on many, many projects. And with us tonight, our special guest, Leonard Pickel, professional haunter, haunt legend in the industry. If you don't know who he is, you've been living under a rock. Mr. Pickel, how you doing tonight?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. So tonight we're going to go, I've titled this episode, The Legend of Leonard Pickel. So we're just going to kind of go over your life as a haunter. So where you started, what you've done, the laundry list of stuff that you have done. I've seen you everywhere. I mean, on YouTube, in magazines. If it's something that a haunter aspires to, you've probably done it. You've been on the Travel Channel. I mean, everything. So just take us through, I mean, the story of what you've done. I don't even know where to start. So just let's go chronologically. How did you get into haunting?
Well, that's an interesting story. I like the first haunted house that I ever did was in college. I was studying to be an architect, and I had only been to two other haunted houses as a patron before I did my own. We just did it. It was really kind of a lark. There were some we were when I was at Texas A&M University, and at that time, they had just started allowing women into the college at all. Before that, it had been an all male college, and we were the freshmen coming into this school, and there were like 4 guys to every 1 female in the entire college, so we couldn't even buy a date. And they did this thing when Halloween rolled around the first year, as I was there as a freshman. They had a deal where the guys would go over to the girls' dorms and trick or treat for an hour, and then the girls would come over to the guys' dorms for an hour and trick or treat. And so my roommate and I dressed up. He went as Groucho Marx. He had the hair for it, and painted him a mustache in indelible ink. It took him a week to get rid of it. He's probably the smartest guy I've ever met in my entire life, but his common sense was not all that great. But and I went and found a little 2x2 and beat the end of it and nailed it to a belt. Put it on a white shirt and put blood around it, and then I had a cape that I had done some dressing up for Halloween. I was always big about dressing up for Halloween. When I was really young, my mother used to make costumes for me. So I had been dressing up for a while, but I really hadn't. The haunted house thing was kind of new. I started college in 1976.
Yeah, so haunted houses weren't even like, it wasn't like it is now. I mean, those are the vintage haunted houses for sure, right?
It was the beginning of the industry, certainly. And so we went trick or treating. So I had a cape, and so I was Dracula, and Groucho Marx and I went over to the girls' dorms and trick or treated. And some of the girls invited us in and gave us punch and candy, and they had decorated their rooms. So when it was our turn, we came running back over to our dorm, and we put all the candy that we just collected from the girls in a bowl to give back to them, and we put a red light in over the sink, and I had this goofy painting of a werewolf that I had done just haphazard from throughout time. Just stupid stuff that you take to college. And so we laid Dracula out on this coffee table with Groucho Marx on the other side of him with a bowl of candy, and with the door to our dorm room wide open and the lights dim, and we waited for the girls to come, not realizing that the girls all went over to the jock dorms and to the senior dorms first. So we waited for a long time, but eventually we heard knock, 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 trick or treat, giggle, giggle down the hallway, and we knew how many doors there were between the door and us. So we counted doors, and so we knew we were next, and we were ready. And of course our door was wide open, and all I remember is seeing like these 3 heads kind of peer in around the edge of the door, The fourth girl walked straight in, stopped, looked at Dracula, looked at Groucho Marx, screamed. The other girls screamed. They all ran down the hallway, and we never saw them again. So my roommate and I looked at each other and said, "Dang, if they're that easy to scare, we got to do a haunted house." So the following year, we talked the dormitory into fronting us $300, and we dressed up the basement really of the building, that the dorm that we were in. We begged, borrowed, and stole masks and props and jam boxes. This is even before they were called jam boxes, but that's what they were, little cassette players with amplifiers in them and speakers. And we created this little haunted house. And the thing was open for 2 nights. We were charging 50 cents a head. And when all was said and done, we had $1,000 in the bank.
Wow.
So that means we put 2,000 people through that thing in 2 nights. And
now,
the interesting thing about it, we were what we would notice is we'd see a guy that would come to the haunted house with a girl, and he'd pay $1, and we'd go through, and then pretty soon we'd see him come back with another girl, and he'd pay another $1 and go through. By the end of the night, he spent $10 and been got groped the whole way through the haunted house. So groped all night long. So it was it was really something that opened my eyes to the possibilities of doing this for fun and profit someday. And I graduated in '80 with an architectural degree and began apprenticing in Dallas as an architect. And at that time, the big haunt in Dallas was the March of Dimes haunted house. And there were several charities that were doing it at that time. The DeSoto Rotary Club, there was a lot of the JC's organizations were doing it. The MDA was doing it. There were a lot of nonprofits that were doing haunted houses, and there really weren't any for-profit haunted houses that I remember from that time frame. But I volunteered with the March of Dimes, and I chaired their event for 4 or 5 years. And at one point, I was designing all the March of Dimes haunts in town. There was a March of Dimes haunt in Fort Worth. There was one in Dallas. There was one in Plano. Before long, I was designing multiple haunted houses for different charities around throughout the area.
Now, with those haunted houses you were doing, how would you say the themes were different from how they are now? Now everybody, we don't see the classic characters that you used to. A lot of haunted houses try to have their own theme. Ours is an asylum. What was kind of the style back then when it came to themes of haunted houses?
It's kind of interesting because when I started doing haunted houses, everything is kind of cyclical. And when we started doing haunted houses, I was really big about not really using licensed characters. I mean, we really didn't have a Frankenstein and a werewolf, but we'd have people that would complain about that. They'd come in and they'd say, "Well, it was a great haunted house, but there was no Dracula," or something silly. And so I started making a window with just a little cutout that had the silhouettes of all the different, standard monsters with a lightning strike that would happen behind it. So if anybody asked where Dracula was, I just point them at the window. Because even back then I was doing stuff that was probably pretty new age for what other people were doing. So I was trying to stay away from creating my own kind of concepts, even back that far. There were other haunts that were doing, more. And it was interesting because almost all the haunts had some kind of a satanic room in it. A lot of the haunted houses at that time were grabbing the people that were going through. I always kind of steered away from that, but being grabbed by an actor going through was very common, in the early '80s when I first started getting really involved in it. And so now we've kind of come back around to that same thing. I mean, we had just graduated in '70s. We had just graduated from peeled grapes for eyeballs and spaghetti for brains. I mean, we really had just graduated from that. Now we talk about haunted houses and they're cutting edge because they're grabbing because the actors are allowed to touch people. Well, no, we did that in the '80s. Now they're going into this room. They have to dig through something gross in a toilet to find a key to find their way out. Well, that's except for the production value, that's really peeled grapes for eyeballs and spaghetti for brains. So really has kind of come full circle in that now haunted houses that are trying to to do something that they think is cutting edge really is just something that is just repeating from from when haunted houses first started. So it's
Right,
not really
right.
anything that's that new. But I chaired the March of Dimes for 4 or 5 years, and then finally scraped up enough room on my credit cards to start my own haunt. It actually benefited the March of Dimes at the time, because at that time, when at the ticket booth, you'd have people come up to you and say, what charity, what nonprofit does this haunted house benefit? They would ask you at the door before they bought a ticket. So the first haunt that I did, we gave 50% proceeds to the March of Dimes. We used volunteer labor and tried to go at it that way, but I really, really wanted to get away from that. So the following year, we did a haunt that I paid all my actors. Of course, I made the mistake of paying the actors that were volunteers the year before, and they were still worthless. So it was, so I ended up firing almost the entire crew. But the first year I did a haunted house, I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't a business. I didn't take business in college, unfortunately. I would have been way better off my entire life if I had. But after the first year we did a haunt, I really built the thing on credit cards and pocket change. And then when all was said and done, I just kind of just forgot to pay the bill in October and tried to pay it off in November. And and I was like, when all was said and done, I was about $20,000 in debt.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a huge failure on my part, because I thought for sure this was a get rich quick scheme. Not realizing that a haunt is a business just like any other, and it takes 3 to 5 years to be able to before you're starting to really see profits. And I went to now that I had started this business without knowing what I was doing, I took a class at a community college on how to start a business. And sat there in horror as the guy told me, you don't start a business on credit cards. You don't do this, you don't do that. Everything I had done, he was telling me not to do. But I had already done it. So we were already in. And then at the end, he says, if you're gonna start a business, you should be an expert in your field. And how do you become an expert in your field? Well, you write a book. So when I was with the March of Dimes, I had this huge stack of paper with a bunch of ideas written on it. This is long before the computer. So everything was done by pencil and paper. And I had this huge stack of room designs I thought about doing, ideas about, some cool ideas, some cool themes, some cool room designs, some concepts of, on how I thought the haunted house should be. There's a lot of stuff about scare forward, to increase the capacity, and making sure that you were, scared not ever closer than arm's reach to a patron to make sure you don't get popped. Putting something between actor separation, putting something between the actors and the people that were going through it. I kind of developed all that stuff when I was working with the March of Dimes. And at one time, one of the March of Dimes ladies saw me with this huge stack of paper that I was rifling through, trying to come up with that year's room designs. And she said, "Would you like for me to organize that and type it up for you?" And it was just like, "Oh my gosh, that would be so awesome." So I hand her my manifesto. And she takes it off, and pretty soon she comes back a week later and this beautifully typed up piece of spiral bound thing, and said the Pickel theory of haunted houses across the top of it. And it was just, I was just so amazed. It was so incredible that she had done all that. And at that time we were doing the haunted houses for the Dallas March of Dimes, and the Fort Worth March of Dimes were just 30 miles away, with the same posters, the same advertising, same radio spots, everything. They always did more people than us. Not much, but they always did a little bit better than us. So that was always the Dallas' goal, was to do more people than the Fort Worth show did. And
Now,
after she hands it to me and lets me look at it, she says, "And I hope you don't mind, but we sent a copy over to the Fort Worth chairman so that he could take a look at it too." And it was just like stabbing me in the heart. All my secrets are now in the hands of the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was devastated until I found out that he wrote "This is stupid" on it and just sent it back. So that really kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that you can't convince somebody of brilliance, even if they've got their mind set. If they've already got their minds made up, they you can't dazzle them with brilliance because they just can't see it. And that was really the last time I was worried about sharing information with anybody. I actually took that book and a bunch of room designs that I had come up with, and sold little booklets for years on how to. With each booklet, there were like 3 booklets, and each one of them had 20 different room design concepts. And I just sold that to people whoever wanted to pay a few bucks for it, and shared really all my room design ideas for years.
Now, with what you were talking about some different things like keeping people at arm's length and having something between the actor and the customer, has any of that thought process changed in your mind? Because a lot of haunts, you talked about the touch haunts and everything, and that's the in thing. We even do one night where we bring that more extreme type of experience for people because people like that. But have any of those thought processes changed? Because I know one thing that really does bother some people is when you get into that personal bubble. They always talk about how in other countries, it's all about touching, they hug and everything when they greet, whereas us as Americans, we have that personal space that we don't want you getting into if we don't know you. Has that thought process changed at all in your mind?
No, not really. We pushed away from. I mean, when I started doing haunted houses, we would have churches. We'd have churches. In fact, one church hired me to consult for them to do their haunted houses. So several of the churches in the area had haunted houses, and then we had other haunted houses that would pick at our haunted house because we were Satan worshipers because we were doing this haunted house. So
interesting.
So we really pushed away from the satanic and the touching and all that kind of stuff because I didn't want to get sued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Like I always heard that haunted houses, like they started with churches and like those, it's called like a hell house, right, or something like that. I've never been to one, but I thought it was interesting when you mentioned Fort Worth, because the only other time I've ever heard of that town is I think when you were on the Travel Channel. I think you were talking about Thrillvania.
Right. Thrillvania is actually in it's a Mesquite area. It's gosh, I can't think what it is, but it's actually east of town, and Fort Worth is west of town.
Right, yeah. Right.
And there was a Hell House there in Dallas for a little while. Hell House was really an opportunity for people to preach the gospel to people that thought they were paying money to go through a haunted house. And the original ones of those were free. They just announced free haunted house, and if you wanted to come, you could go. And that was that. You couldn't complain about that if they stopped you and preached to you at the end. But after a while, they said, "Well, this is crazy. Let's charge." So they started charging people to go through those, and that became more of an issue. In fact, the one that was in Dallas, I think it was in Grand Prairie actually, but it's between Dallas and Fort Worth. They actually, had some altercations because people, got pissed when they decided that they, paid to go in this thing, and all it was them preaching to you not to do drugs and not to get abortions and not to get not to sin.
Exactly.
They were pretty upset with it, and so there were some altercations that kind of shut that show down.
Right. So anyway, so you were hired by Hell House.
And we were hired by the churches. The church haunts back then weren't hell houses. They were. I mean, the ones that I'm talking about, they were just doing a haunted house as a fundraiser. They would just throw something together in their basement and they'd run it for a night or two, and make a little bit of money and go. And then there were other churches that would pick at us because we were doing a haunted house, and we were obviously satanic worshipers since we were picketing haunted houses, which didn't make any sense. I always wondered why they didn't go picket the churches that were doing haunted houses instead of us. But
we had that problem too. A few years ago, kind of like that. We did a big thing of marketing that we always do is our parades, and we did one here in the town that I live in, and we stopped doing it because about half of the crowd was all like, "Yeah, that's awesome," and like we're not out there with anything crazy because we understand that it's not Halloween Halloween time. Like we actually have one here this weekend. So it's around this time of year that we always have these because it's usually cheap and there's thousands of people at these things that are exposed to you without even choosing it. But in our town, like the last time we did it, the people were just so mad. Like they're screaming at us and flipping us off and screaming like only positive messages and stuff. Like, and it was just crazy because like what we do is really a positive thing. Yes, it's a scary haunted house, but like I have so many kids at our haunted house who wouldn't be doing anything else otherwise than probably out in trouble. And they're there all year round. I'm teaching them how to build. I'm teaching them theater stuff. I'm making sure that they're not out messing around with stuff they shouldn't mess around with, but the general public never gets to see that.
No. Yeah, I consulted one time for a Catholic church in Rhode Island, and that's what they used the haunted house for, was outreach. They would bring in at-risk kids and help them, and they would let them design the rooms and let them help them build it and help them set dress it and do the scenic and help. Then they would operate the room, and they used it as a way to to bring in at-risk youth to give them a place to eat, a place to feel like they belong, and to keep them away from the gangs and stuff. So I've seen that happen a lot. I've seen haunted houses that have done really, really good work for the for the community and for the churches in the community too. But and it's kind of a bad rap because Halloween is actually a Christian holiday. It's the day before All Saints Day.
Oh yeah.
It's the evening before All Saints Day. So it's actually a Christian holiday. And it wasn't until, I don't know, somewhere in the 60s, 50s or 60s that some church decided that the pumpkins and the black cats and all that stuff had to be satanic. So they started kind of railing against it, which really doesn't make sense at all.
Right.
So yeah, we started, and what happened is I did a few haunted houses, and I was really good at scaring people. I was really good at building haunted houses. What I wasn't very good at was getting people through the door. And my dad, who was the practical, guy of the family, he said, you've got so many people that are coming to you wanting you to design haunted houses for them. There's no risk in that. Why don't you drop, doing these yourself and start just, form a company that just builds haunted houses for people. And that was and that's what I did. I started Elm Street Entrepreneurs, which later just became Entrepreneurs. And we built, we've been building haunted houses since the late 80s, early 90s. And we did them all across the country and around the world. At first, we were building them for people in our warehouse and then shipping them out. That became way too cumbersome, because my background is architectural anyway. What I do now is if somebody hires me to help them get started or to build a haunted house, design a haunted house for them, I just provide them with working drawings like an architect would do for for a house or any other kind of building. And then you hire a local contractor to build it, or you can build it yourself from the drawings. Right. And we come in after the thing is the panels are built, or it's and help you set it up, oversee the installation, oversee the special effects, and make sure that all the scare gags are working, and we spec all the animatronics and lighting or anything that you need for that show, and that gives you that makes more sense. It doesn't make sense for me to build it in Florida and ship it, to California. It makes way more sense to build it locally, and that saves people a lot of money when they're trying to get started.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now, because it seems like every time I see you, you're in like a new part of like the country. It's like I'm in Texas and now I'm up in Pennsylvania when you were working at the asylum, I think and then I think I thought I saw a video where you were working on one in like somewhere in Europe.
I haven't done one in Europe. I did do one in Australia.
Australia. That's what it was.
And I've
That's
designed
what it was.
stuff. I've designed stuff that's in Saudi Arabia and Russia, and I've designed
Really?
stuff all over the place. But those people have not. They didn't fly me in to oversee the installation, which
Right.
always makes me wonder what the hell it looked like when they were done with it. Because
Uh-huh.
I have a feeling. I mean, even when I'm on site, you know, and I'm showing this guy a very detailed drawing of, you know, you were supposed to build this, and then he shows me what he built, and I said, show me how that even resembles the drawing. I mean,
Right.
oh no, this will be a lot better. It works a lot better if you do it this way. And it's like, dude, I have been doing this forever. If there was a better way to do it, I would have figured it out by now. But thanks for your effort. Now take that apart and put it back together like the drawing, because that's what we need.
Mm-hmm. So like, what is that like when you build? Because you're not just all right. So I read an article or I saw a video or something like that a few years ago that explained how like haunted houses in Asia are extremely different than haunted houses here, because the things that people are afraid of there are extremely different than what they're afraid of here. So
Sure.
like here, you've got all this stuff like the slasher movies and things like that, where the article kind of explained that over there they're not as exposed to that kind of media. So like there's more stuff that they're afraid of is those kind of Asian style horror movies like The Ring, The Grudge, lots of ghosts and angry spirits and stuff like that. So what's that like kind of building a haunted house not only in another country but for another kind of a culture?
Right. Yeah, you have to do your research and find out what it is that you know, that scares people. But you know, to me, a haunted house is a movie that you walk from scene to scene.
Absolutely.
So it's very easy to go in and grab the horror movies of, you know, the popular horror movies of whatever that genre is, and you know, you don't want to copy what they're doing. You don't want to use licensed characters, but you can see what is scaring people, and really it really still comes down to startles. I mean, you know, people might call my haunt design a boo house because there's a lot of startles in it. But that's really, I mean, the only way to scare a 21-year-old white male, which is who I aim my scares at, you know, the only way to scare him is to do something he's not expecting. You know, so you can't have some menacing guy standing in the way. That's not going to scare him. You can't show him something he's supposed to be afraid of. You got to do something he's not expecting. You got to misdirect him. You got to point him. You got to show him something that he thinks is going to pop up and scare him, and then come from a completely different direction. You know, or do something to unsettle him. You know, and that's I designed my haunted house for that 21-year-old male because he's the hardest person to scare. If I can get him to jump a couple of times, then I know that I got everybody else.
Right.
And so you just kind of have to utilize that storyline, you know, concept, and you know, think about what kind of horror movies are in a different culture that scares them and may not even scare you, but it's obviously stuff that they're going to be freaked out about, and then just utilize, you know, your standard, you know, drop panel and crash doors. I mean, all of the scares that I use around the world are still the ones that I use locally. They just might be dressed differently. Right. There's really still something appearing out of nowhere that scares people.
Right.
And that's live action too. I mean, I'm you know, partially because people don't even call me and want a haunted house until, you know, now or August. And they said, I've got a space, I've got money, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to do a haunted house. You know, you can't call the big prop manufacturers and say, hey, send me some of those animatronics because I'm going to need them, because they're so slammed that they won't even answer the phone. So the style of haunted house that I do, especially for a beginner, is going to be something that's much more actor driven, you know, and that means you got to design the scares into the haunt, have people popping out and you know, hiding. You have to design into the floor plan where that actor's going to live, what he's going to do when the people come into the room, how he's going to get back to that position without walking backwards through the flow of the people, because you don't want to bottleneck yourself up.
Right.
Now, in your plans, do you put that kind of information in there for the customer? Like, this is what the actor's doing.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, obviously, they have some free reign to, act the way they need to act, but based on the
Yeah.
theme.
Yeah,
But
I'm a consultant. All I can do is suggest. I can't put a gun to your head and tell you that you have to do it this way. And so there's a lot of people that pay me more money, a lot of money, and still do it the way they want to do it instead of the way I told them to. And so I just work with them as best I can. But yeah, they get a complete description of what each one of the actors will do. How the room should be utilized for the best effect. And one of the things I also do is I designate each scare for a different part of the group. So, because I can't tell you how many haunted houses that I've gone through, and I've been 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th in a group, and never seen a dang thing. So when I design the haunted house, I'm thinking this scare is going to be for the middle of the group. This scare is going to be the back of the group. This is going to be the front, but not at the front, from the side, so that you're not stopping them from going. You're literally trying to chase them through the haunt. And then I designate it, and it'll say right over the space, right over the place where the actor's standing, you will scare the middle of the group. You will scare the end of the group, because I want to make sure that everybody gets a good scare.
That's awesome. I've never heard of that, but that's really cool.
so like you have like a label, like if they're a window, if they're a drop panel,
Right.
you have that above there for the actors so they know,
Yep.
hey, this is when I need to scare.
Yeah. So they can, and I also, you can't just drill a hole in the wall and a peephole and expect somebody to be able to see what's going on. One of the things I do for a peephole is cut a jagged, broken plaster hole, and then put 1x4 or 1x2 slatting behind it, and then that gives you kind of a slot, a wide vista where you can see side to side. And if you're a little shorter or a little taller, you can look through a different crack.
Right.
And that gives you a better opportunity to be able to see what's going on.
That's a hell of a tip.
No charge.
So, yeah.
Write that down, Justin.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. I mean, hell, I'm recording it. So, but just a quick kind of thing. So I think it's so funny that we're talking now, especially about your business, because when I started, literally like the first year after we started this, when I was like probably 13 years old, I was flipping through a magazine once, probably Haunted Attraction magazine, and I saw an ad for you, and it said like haunted house, pretty much just saying that like you'll help with haunted houses and you'll answer questions and stuff. And I think it said like to call any time or hours of operation or whatever it was. And I called, and you actually answered the phone. And I think I hung up like, oh my God, there's someone really there. And then I called back, and I would like call you all the time and ask you questions. And it's just so funny now. You probably don't even remember this, but I've said for years, like I watched a lot of like motivational videos, and everyone's always like, you need a mentor. So then like, even though you didn't know me, I would tell people like, I have a mentor in haunted housing, and his name's Leonard Pickel and all this stuff. And I'd tell about you, and it was great. And then like I've moved on, but I've always said like, you were the first person who gave me advice on haunted houses and kind of taught me stuff about haunted houses. And I'd be watching again every year. I watch them even still on all those America's haunted houses or whatever it is, and you'd like end up on there. I'd be like, look, my mentor, he's on our show or whatever it was, and everyone thought it was the coolest thing. So I just wanted to let you know that, and thank you for being there for me and luring me in the company, because it's stuck. So
yeah, I've created a lot of monsters in my lifetime.
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah. So
Personal entry, March 29th, 1897. Alexander Hammond, newly appointed physician for Blackman Sanitarium for the criminally insane. I have come to the conclusion that, after taking this position several days ago, I fear I am overwhelmed by what I have discovered, especially in reference to patient 292. I worry that my sanity may be at risk, and I question my very judgment. May God help us all.
All right, guys, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed our music. We'll have a few more of those as we continue our talk. So we just talked about, I brought up Haunted Attraction Magazine, and you wanted to kind of explain that. So how did that all start?
Well, as I said, the guy told me that to be an expert, you needed to write a book. So I wrote the little booklets and started, and then now I got these booklets, so I got to sell them. So I put a tiny ad in Fangoria magazine and
Right.
started. So one October I went to the Dallas library and I pulled the Friday before Halloween. I pulled every newspaper because they had newspapers from around the country. And so I just grabbed all these newspapers for the Friday before Halloween, and then I wrote out all the information that was for the haunted houses. So, I get the Denver paper and the Boston paper, the largest newspapers from all around the country were available there at the Dallas library. And so I created this database of haunted houses across the country, so I could send little flyers, little mailers to talk these people into buying these books, and from that kind of grew into a newsletter because a friend of mine, Mark Klein, that is a fiberglass guy. He's been in the haunted house business and just entertainment business for all his life, but he was telling me that this newsletter that he would send to his past clients was the best way he ever got business. So I said, well, we could do a newsletter. So I got together with a friend of mine named Oliver Haller, and we started this newsletter and called it Haunted Attraction. And
all right, hold on one second. So you're telling me you're the first guy ever who made a database of haunted houses where now every state has one, there's nationwide ones, and you were the first one? Man, you've done it all.
Well, I mean, again, and it wasn't really planned. We all just kind of fell into it, really.
Yeah.
But I had this database and ended up being about 3,000 names.
Wow.
And we started, and so we started this newsletter and we sent out the first one for free, and then started trying to get subscriptions to it. And, that 4-page newsletter eventually turned into a 50-page magazine called Haunted Attraction Magazine. And I, was the chief editor, bottle washer for that publication for 50 issues before we sold it. And again, I never took journalism in college. I never even was, I was not even part of the yearbook in high school. So I really had never done anything like that before. But the whole concept of sharing stuff, was before the internet, at least before the internet was big. And we were, the whole concept of sharing information on how to build a prop, sharing stories and, blow by blow walkthroughs of the incredible haunted houses around the country was really what the magazine was all about. And it was really all about sharing. It was sharing information. So we owned the magazine for 50 issues, and we were struggling with it. It was highly critically acclaimed, but we never really were making that much money with it. Sometimes we've been having to dip into our pockets to pay for an issue. And a guy came to me and said he wanted to start he wanted to start a magazine about the haunted house industry. And I said, dude, there's already 3 out there. They're all struggling. Why don't you just partner up with me and we'll see if we can't, take Haunted Attraction magazine to the next level. And he said, well, I'm not really much into partners. Would you be interested in selling it? And at the time I then thought, well, not really, but, make me an offer. And the price that he came back with was more than I could refuse.
Mhm.
So we sold it to him, and I told him, the biggest thing that I can tell you that you have to do, this thing has to come out on time. If you tell your advertisers that it's going to be out on this date, it's got to come out on that date. The worst thing you can do is be late with this thing. And this is a great opportunity for you to reset, fix the mistakes that we had made, and really make this thing something. The other thing you cannot do is you cannot have your own haunted house. At the time, he was a homeowner. So I said, do not do a pro haunted house, because if you do, you'll never get these magazines out on time. And so the very first issue that he came out with after we sold it to him was late. And the next thing I hear, he's opening his own haunted house. So sure enough, he just ran the thing right into the ground and ended up really just giving it away. I think his wife got sick, and there were some other issues going on, but he lost a huge amount of money on the haunted house that he tried to do by himself, and ended up losing the magazine. And now it's now the URL it's just kind of an online something.
Yeah, it's pretty much dead, because I bought, I don't know, probably 2 years ago. I still have an app on my phone. There's actually an app now, in case you didn't know that. And they haven't had an issue in at least as long as I've had it. So.
Well, and we didn't know. I mean, when we sold it, we thought we were, everybody was saying, oh, the internet is going to take over the magazine and the news industry, and no, there's not going to be such thing as magazines anymore. And so we didn't know whether that was true or not, but it certainly made sense. And so we and I really miss it. It was interesting how much that unplugged me from the industry. I was, I used to get constant phone calls from people that were, asking questions and doing, doing big things, and all the big haunts would call me and, want to get an article or whatever. And it was amazing to me how much when I sold that magazine, that phone just stopped ringing. It was pretty startling how much that took me out, how much of a power position that was, that I didn't really even realize at the time that I had it.
Yeah, it's even kind of like it's pushed me away from the magazines. Like I know that Larry Kirshner, he does Haunt World magazine, but it's like, I know that these guys are all so busy with so much other stuff that I don't want to buy one and then not get like the information.
Right.
Because that's really like why I'm buying it, is because I'm interested in the industry. But now everyone has a website, everyone has a Facebook, there's all kinds of pages like Haunters Hangout and every other thing, that everyone's just kind of posting their own stuff anyway. So there's nothing I'm going to read in there, I feel like, that I can't learn by just asking or meeting people, or I'm just rereading stuff that I had a class at a trade show or whatever. So
yep. And when we started the magazine, there just wasn't any of that. I mean, the internet was pretty new. There was a thing called the Halloween L that was a listserv, but way back before there was much in the way of websites even. And so it was, and I think I think we helped the industry. I mean, we certainly took the industry to another level. It showed people what they could do, with a haunt. And, I was very proud of it. And I really miss it. I really miss writing the articles. I try to write every once in a while now, but I'm too busy. I submit articles to other magazines, but but it's just it's kind of hard. And people keep asking me, when are you going to write your book? When are you going to come out with the book? And it's just like, man, I'd love to do that, but who has the time?
Not enough paper.
Well, that's true too. And one of the things that I did with the magazine, I was pretty verbose. I mean, we would have an article about a haunted house that was a couple of thousand words. And then on top of that, we would go in and do a blow-by-blow description of what happened as you were going through the haunted house.
Really?
With a lot, we had lots of photos. We never got the photos as big as I would have liked them to be, but and so that was another 3,000 words. So you had a 5,000 or 6,000 word article, about this one haunted house, and and it was interesting. And a lot of those articles I totally wrote. I mean, when you go to a haunt, you say, we think your haunt's amazing. We want to write an article about it. It doesn't make sense for me to just sit here and ask you a million questions. Write the article yourself. Write an article about your haunt, send it to me, and then let me, ghostwrite it. Let me put my name on it and massage it. And I would always come back to them, with stuff like, as silly as, how did you meet your wife and what does she think about it? What's her involvement in this thing, and turn that 1,000, word article that they provided into something that was just massive and detailed. And it's really just, asking questions that I wanted to know. I wanted to know how'd you come up with this room design? It's really cool. How'd you come up with the storyline or the concept of your haunt? That's really neat. And I really enjoyed it. I really miss it. I hope that the people that read it really felt how much love I put into the publication. It's a shame that I didn't hold on to it, because it really did kind of go into the toilet after we sold it.
Yeah, I mean, I missed it. I mean, that's why I bought. I'm pretty sure I'm still like owed issues from what I paid for it. It's not your fault, obviously. You're not even involved, but whoever owns it, if you own it, let me know. I'll help you make issues just so I can get them. But yeah, I don't know. I always loved it. Like, I would just like read through over and over again and flip through. I always loved like the pictures of stuff of haunted houses, because I feel like every time I looked at it, I would see something else that I didn't notice, or every picture was some kind of idea. It was almost like when you'd go in like a video store when those were around still, and you could grab a movie and like look at its back and its cover and everything, and it might not even have anything to do with the movie, or what's happening on a cover might not even be what's in that movie, but the artwork and everything was just awesome. It's trying to draw you in. And that's kind of what like those pictures were. And I loved those so much. And I really miss those. I feel like they're kind of missing now. I don't see stuff like that anywhere else, I guess.
Yeah. And I don't know whether it would work now or not. I mean, everybody seems to think the internet is free.
Right.
So they want all the information for free, and you can't, and people don't want to advertise in a magazine because they can just get on the website. They would rather do a Facebook, pay for a Facebook post for $20 instead of, pay for an ad in a magazine that might be $1,000. So,
right.
So, I don't, it's interesting, that we had the opportunity to get out, and we did. But it really is painful, because it, when we let it go, it really did kind of crash. So,
right.
But it happens.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in the industry like this, as long as you have been, I mean, you're going to have a lot of peaks and valleys, I guess. So
I've made every mistake there is to be made twice, because the first time I made it and seemed to be like it was a mistake. I had to check and make it a second time to make sure, because I thought it was a good idea originally. Surely it's not as bad as I think it is, and usually it was just as bad the second time, if not worse. But and that's one of the things that I sell to my clients. I mean, I did haunted houses for years, most of them not making the kind of money that they really should have. So that's what I sell to people when I'm, when I as a consultant is, don't do that. I tried it; it didn't work. So it's and that's kind of what I sell as a haunted house designer or consultant is, I've done these. I've looked at everything. I've watched other people do stuff. I've tried almost everything. I know what works and what doesn't. People are always coming up with new stuff, and I learn stuff every day. But but that's what I sell as a consultant, and I see so many people, even friends of mine, that decide they're going to jump into the haunted house industry, and they don't ask me any questions. I mean, I listened to a seminar one time from a guy that was telling the horrors of starting my first haunted house, and he was a friend of mine. He could have picked up a phone and called me, asked me. I would have told him anything he wanted to know without even charging him. And he'd say, first we did this, and I said, oops, that was a mistake. And he said, it was a mistake, and here's why. And then we did this, and I said, oh, that's a mistake too. And he said, and it was a mistake, and here's why. And it was just like, why didn't you ask me? Why didn't you call me up and say, I'm buying a tent to put a haunted house in. Should I use vinyl or tarp? He used it was a cloth tent.
Well, that's not going to work.
Right, but he thought it was more expensive, so he thought it was better. It's just like, no, man, it's just going to rot when you roll it up and bring it back out. It's going to have giant holes in it. So,
right. I mean, I can attest to. I'll attest, and he'll attest too, because he works with me every day at our haunt, and he's usually the one I'll come to and say, like, I have an idea, or here's what I'm thinking, and whatever it is. And sometimes I'm just like, I'm stuck on this idea that it's going to work, and then a year later, there we are ripping it out because I'm saying, it didn't work. And we learn from it.
I'm saying I told you so.
You usually, yeah. So I
try
guess
to be the
sometimes
voice
you just
of
gotta
reason.
fail. So,
Leonard, you were saying that like when you were doing the magazine, you would like do reviews of haunts and everything. Do you get out to haunted houses a lot during the season, or do you find that you're just way too busy to where you don't get to go as much as you'd like?
No, that's one of the things that's nice about what I do. Most of my clients are up and operational by the first weekend in October. So I'm done. I get to travel the countryside and see, haunted houses all over. I typically, in a typical year, I'll see 200 haunted houses across the country. And there's a handful that I want to go out and see all the time. Try to get to see them every year. But then I try to hit different areas and haunts that I've heard about. I'll try to go and make sure I make a trip up there to see them, and that's that really helps me keep a finger on the pulse, if you will, of the haunted house industry. Find out what people are doing, find out what's going on. I just happened to be in Salt Lake City, Utah, one October, and that's the first time I had seen anybody doing full contact haunted houses, and they were doing almost everybody in the market was doing a full contact, or some kind of contact haunted house. And some of them you would go into and you would buy an upgrade to get touched, or another upgrade to get picked up and carried out of the room. Another haunted house, we're full contact. If you don't want to be touched, don't come in. Another haunted house is we're full contact, but if you don't want to be touched, we're going to sell you this glow necklace or something, so that means we can't touch you. It was kind of all over the board. They were trying to figure out what they were doing. And so it was kind of that was really kind of the first thing I had seen about that kind of stuff. Now it's all over, but many years ago I went back and saw it, and interestingly, there was one haunt that was in that market that it was a pretty big haunt. I was really kind of impressed with it, and it didn't have a touch option. It was just a haunted house, no touching, no nothing. And then 3 or 4 years later, I went back to Salt Lake City, happened to be back for something else, and went back to that haunted house because I really liked it. And they had an option. They had added, a glow necklace to get touched. And, that kind of told me the direction that the industry is going. Because if you have a haunted house that says boldly on the ticket booth, you will not be touched, we won't touch you. The perception is that the haunted house down the road that is touching people is going to be scarier because they're touching people.
Right.
It's not necessarily the case, because I've gone to haunted houses that are a full contact, full touch haunt, and the actors are touching you, but they don't really know why. There's not really a reason for them to be touching you. They just know that they can and they're supposed to, and it's supposed to be scary, and they do it. You really, if you're going to have a contact haunt, which I don't have a problem with, I don't really design them that way, and most of my clients don't want that. But if you're going to do a contact haunt, it kind of needs to be, a cold touch and, from a dark corner, grabbing a wrist or an ankle, and not, you're messing with my hair because I'm walking by. You really need to do something that's more, that first off fits your theme. I mean, what's the reason these people are touching me? and you can't just touching people for the sake of touching them is not going to do anything.
Right.
The additional thing of taking them off and giving them a separate show that's different from everybody else, that I'm not sure what that gets you, because the people that didn't get to see that are going to be pissed.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I treat that like this. I do that the same way in our haunt with language and stuff. So like, I don't have a problem with heavy language. I have a rule, like, no offensive language. So you're not calling anyone names, no slurs, stuff like that. But if you want to use language, I need to know why. Like, how is that improving your acting? Like, I think, like, you don't need loads of swear words in music either. But I think it was Marilyn Manson once. He said that sometimes my music is aggressive. So sometimes I need to swear in it to get my aggressive message across, or how I'm feeling across. That's kind of how I feel about acting in a haunt. I mean, if you want to touch, if you want to act, if you want to swear, whatever, but is it enhancing your show, or are you just swearing because you think that's scary? And I don't agree with that if you just think it's scary, because it's not. I mean, people swear every day, so no one's afraid of a cuss word just because there's some high school kid in there screaming out all kinds of vulgar stuff. But if it's going to make you seem more dirty, or more of a scary redneck, or whatever it is, that I think that's cool. But so I'm going to ask, and this obviously doesn't mean what's the best haunt, but what is your favorite haunt that you have been to, since you've been around for so long and you've been to countless numbers of haunts? But what's just like the favorite haunt of yours, even if it isn't around anymore?
and that's kind of like asking me what my favorite song is. Changes.
Right.
And it really depends on your taste.
Right.
Rocky Point, it was probably the most incredible haunted house I've ever been to. Simply because, I mean, it was owned by a woman to begin with, and the haunt was so clean you could eat off the floor. I mean, you just felt like it was just an immaculate show. It was huge, too big even. But that was really an incredible show, and it was doing massive numbers long before any of the other haunted houses were doing 50, 70,000 people through them. It was doing those numbers long before anybody else was even thinking about that kind of stuff. So there's a handful of others that are closed now. Rocky Point's gone, but there's a handful of others that are pretty good. But as far as shows that are open now, probably the best, in my opinion, the best show in the country. They're the top 5, I'd say. One of which is the 13th Gate in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Incredible show, incredible talented guy, nice guy. That's one of my favorites. I always try to see that anytime I'm in the area. And in that location, there's the Mortuary and the Rise is also a great show that are all right there in that same area, so you can go see all of those. Erebus in Pontiac, Michigan's an incredible show, massive thing. That he's been haunting forever. He's the best at coming up with cool new room designs. I always love to go at his show and see what his new room designs are. I've borrowed several of those myself.
Yeah,
always trying to put my own twist on them so that they don't look like something that's copied directly. But still,
right.
he's the best at coming up with really cool, interesting room designs that I've never seen anywhere else before. He's really good at that. Headless Horseman, especially their hayride and their haunts in New York State, incredible show. Bates Motel in Philadelphia is a good show. It's one of the best hayrides in the country. Netherworld in Atlanta is a great show. It's always, it's just got detail on top of detail on top of detail for no other reason than detail. It's just, unbelievable. It's really a haunters show.
Yeah.
And they're always open on the weekend after Halloween. So that if you want to bump into me in the middle of nowhere, it'll be in Atlanta, the Saturday after Halloween.
Yeah.
because they're always open.
Yeah, I've never been there, but that's definitely one that I've always wanted to go to. Because it definitely seems like they don't cut a single corner. I mean,
and they've moved to a new location now. The building that they've been in forever they didn't own, which is crazy. You got to own a building if you're going to have something that's doing those kind of numbers. And so he's moved further out of town, I don't think he built the building, but he was able to take over an empty building and start over from scratch. Hopefully he purchased it this time. So that's going to be a great thing to go see this year, because it's going to be, I would imagine that he's pulled out all the stops, being able to fix the issues that building had that he was in before, and be able to, come up with some really, really cool new ideas, and not, for years he would take that show completely down and reset the walls up, and it was a completely different show every year. But he put so much detail and stuff into it. It got to where he was just kind of, reset dressing the pathway. The pathway didn't change very much. But so you could, if you've been there as many times as I have, you would recognize some of the rooms that were in the same places they were before. The average public probably didn't realize that. But this new one is going to be a completely fresh start. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in October.
Driver, where are we? I don't see anything.
Sorry, Governor. You won't get me anywhere near that cursed place. You're on your own from here.
So let's hop on track again. So you sold the
magazine.
The magazine.
Yeah, and before we did that, we started HauntCon. When Transworld started out, it was really a show that was, in fact, we called it the Chicago Halloween Show, because it was really a show for people that owned retail stores to come in and buy masks and costumes and orange doilies to sell to people in October. So it really had nothing to do with the haunted house industry at all. But the haunted house industry didn't have a trade show, so we were kind of crashing the party. In fact, long before Transworld even got going, they called me up because they had heard that I had this 3,000 person database of haunted houses around the country, and so they had done a single seminar. One year they did a seminar that was fun and profit in the haunted house industry, and they invited. And they had some guy, I had heard that they were I'd actually gone to the show once, walked around it and said, I would never have a booth here because these guys are just selling orange doilies. They're really not haunted house people. I saw a few people there, but there wasn't really any kind of haunted house presence there at all. And then they decided they wanted to do this seminar. So I heard about this seminar that was going to be at the show. I hadn't been in a couple of years, so I decided to go out and I called the guy. It took me a while to find out who it was that was doing this seminar. And I called the guy and said, I understand you're doing a seminar on haunted houses. Do you do a haunted house? And he says, no, we build props. And I said, do you need any help with this seminar? And he said, oh, no, we're expecting about 20 people, and we'll just sit around a table and chat. And Transworld had just purchased my database, so I knew 100 people that were already coming to the show. And so I told him, boy, you better have a big room because this is going to be way bigger than you're thinking. And so we filled 300 people in a room and another 300 people outside trying to get into this seminar.
Jeez.
And the poor guy at the front of the room had no idea what he was talking about. You know, he was up there talking and doing his presentation that he had planned, and you know, and somebody raised a hand and said, you know, all this stuff sounds good, but it's, you know, it's really fragile. The stuff that you're talking about putting in this haunted house you know, in my haunted house, it wouldn't last 5 or 10 minutes. And the guy says, oh, we find that if you make stuff really cool and really pretty, that people won't bother it. And you heard 300 people go, yeah, right. You know, it was just like, and then suddenly Joe Jensen, who's been a haunter forever, stood up and kind of took over the whole room and said, you know, this isn't really, there's no information here for us to really share. And he started talking to everybody about, you know, he had everybody, if you're doing 5,000 people or less, raise your hand, look around, see who those people are that, you know, if you raised your hand, look around, see who those other people are. If you're doing 10,000, if you're doing 20,000, he kept going up. And he says, look around and see who those people are, because those are the people that are on your level. And those are the people that you need to talk with before the end of the show. And so, you know, in reality, buying my database is really what kicked Transworld off into the haunted house industry. And the following year, they did a full day seminar. And between myself and a partner that I had and some other friends that I asked to speak, we did all of the seminars for Transworld. In fact, for years at Transworld, I did a free how to get started, a 2-parter. It was so I just kept talking. They had to shut me up. I took 2 days, 2 mornings of the show. I did a free seminar on how to get started in the haunted house industry, you know, that I just did. I mean, they never paid me for it. I never got anything for it. You know, I just did because I enjoy talking haunt, and I was trying to share with people. And we did that for years. And we kept trying to tell Transworld that, you know, for 15 years, we went to Transworld. And every year we would tell them, if you want to do a show for the haunted house industry, this is what you've got to do. You've got to do haunt tours. You know, you've got to do that. We just told them the things that they needed to do. And we were actually having a party. We were doing a costume ball at Transworld when it was in Chicago, and inviting everybody out, you know, to a party that Haunted Attraction Magazine was throwing for them. And you know, for 15 years, we told Transworld, if you want to cater to the haunted house industry, this is what we need. We need more education. It needs to be cheap education. We need, you know, we need haunt tours. We need workshops. And Transworld just really they just kind of thumbed their nose at us at the time. All they were looking for was people walking up and down the aisle so they could charge more for their booths. And so 2004, we started our own convention. We called it HauntCon. Midwest Haunters Convention started the same year. And we took all of those ideas that we'd been telling Transworld that they should do for 15 years, and we put it into our own show and created HauntCon. And, you know, and what was one of the things that was really cool about it was that it moved to a different city every year. So it you know, we were able to go around and talk haunted houses into opening up for us, you know, so we could tour, so you could see the haunted houses in that market that you couldn't, most people just can't get away from their own shows in October to be able to go see. So we were able to tour around and you know, we were in Detroit and in Denver and Dallas and Louisville, and just moved all around the country, doing haunted house tours. And you know, and slowly but surely, and when we did that, Transworld threw me out of the show. It was in 2004. I had purchased my booth. Haunted Attraction Magazine had purchased a booth at the show. We didn't even dream about trying to ask if Hong Kong could have a booth at the show. But you know, suddenly I get my check back in the mail that I paid for Haunted Attraction Magazine's booth, and they told me not only was Haunted Attraction Magazine not allowed to have a booth at Transworld, but I was not allowed to go into the show. Huh. And it was really kind of funny because that year they had a couple of people got together when they heard about that, and so people were walking around through the entire show with little buttons on that said, "Where's the pickle?" They kept, you know, so there was an army of people walking around the trade show with where's the pickle buttons on. And so after that year, they allowed me to start showing back at the show again. And and they even allowed HauntCon to have booth space at the show for a while, although they didn't treat us right. They charged us the same as everybody else did, but they didn't allow us to tap their database. If you get a booth at Transworld, you can pay $300 and they'll send out an email blast to all of the email database that they have. And they would never do that for us, even though weren't willing to discount the booth for us, but they weren't willing to do the email blast either for us.
Mm-hmm.
But so that happened. I mean, we did that for many, many years, and then the show actually, when the show moved from Chicago to Las Vegas, which was just a huge disaster. And what happened
did that 1 year, right?
Right. What happened was the haunted house people never had any business going to the Transworld show, to the Chicago Halloween show. Because the haunted house guy, everybody loves to get stuff at wholesale. I have a business. I would love to buy my computers at wholesale, but I can't. I have to go to Best Buy or Walmart or wherever to buy my computers. That's the same way with the mask. Just because you have a haunted house doesn't mean you have the right to go and buy a mask that you're going to put on an actor in your haunted house and get it at wholesale. That's not how it works. You have to buy it at retail because you're the end user. If you're buying it and put it in your gift shop and selling it to somebody, then you can buy it at wholesale. But typically you're going to have to buy 12 of them. You can't buy just one. So a haunted house guy has no business buying stuff at wholesale level. And that was a huge amount of friction that was between the Halloween wholesale side, which is what Transworld was, and the haunted house people that by now we had taken over a large chunk of that show. I mean, we had, 100 booths or better that were people that were doing just Halloween, the haunted house stuff, because we really didn't have our own show. So then that's where HauntCon came in, because we really we're trying to, so Transworld just kind of copied what we were doing. They started doing tours, they started doing parties at night. They started doing workshops and stuff. They just kind of copied everything that Midwest and HauntCon were doing throughout time. And eventually they became the big dog. Midwest Haunters Convention got big because they stayed in the same place. Our model of moving around, which the goal there of moving the show around was to be able to see other haunts that people hadn't been able to see before, and to grow the industry. If you're just in one place, then the people that are around there, it's really easy for them to come to it. But the people that are far away, it's a little harder to do. So when we were traveling around, we were going into cities and introducing people and showing them how much fun a haunted house convention could be. And then we'd leave, and then especially when we were doing stuff in Louisville and around, really kind of all the way around Midwest, those people, when we left and went someplace else, they said, well, let's just go to Midwest. So I think we really built up Midwest's data or their attendance, because they were in the same place every year, and we just kept moving around. And I do think we grew the industry. I think we got to see some really cool haunts. One of the shows, we went to Rocky Point. We went to, some of these haunts that are gone now that you can't even see. And if you went to the last chance you could have seen them sometimes was at HauntCon. So, I mean, we were able to do what we did. But when they tried to move Transworld to Vegas, the Halloween people had finally had it. They were done with people, the haunted house people would show up, 20 of them all in the same, in the same jacket or in the same T-shirt, and they would walk through and pick up 100 catalogs out of this, the nicely printed catalogs out of this wholesale booth that no one, that cost them $10 a piece. I mean, the Morris Costumes catalog was like a phone book, and you have 10 people walk by, and all of them would pick up a catalog. It cost them a huge amount of money, and those people that were grabbing them couldn't even order stuff from them because they weren't wholesale buyers. And so it finally came to a head when Transworld tried to move the show to Las Vegas, and the haunted house people had it. The Halloween people had it. The Halloween people split off, and they created their own show, which is now called the Halloween and Party Expo. which is it moved to Houston, and now it's in New Orleans every year. And when Transworld lost the Halloween side, they just grabbed on and latched on, with talons into the haunted house section. And the buyers were really, the vendors were the ones that told them, you're not having this in Vegas again. You're going to move this someplace that's cheaper than Chicago. It's further south in Chicago, so we don't get snowed out like we had before. And they moved it to St. Louis, and it's been there ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah, but wasn't there an issue with like people weren't going to the show? They were getting distracted as well. Like people were going and playing at the casinos.
Here it was in Vegas. That's the worst place in the world. I mean, people always say in the convention industry, they say, "Oh, you got to have your convention in Las Vegas, or you got to have it in Orlando." Well, I would never do it in Vegas, because when Transworld was there in Vegas, there was no networking, there was no socializing after hours, because as soon as the Troy Show floor closed, they were off seeing shows or they were off gambling. There were too much other distractions for it to work in Las Vegas. And Transworld had a show in Las Vegas. They had decided that they needed a show that was on the West Coast for the California people. And so they did a show in Las Vegas. A separate show was after the March show in Chicago. They had done that for several years. And we used to go just because, hey, it's in Vegas. We just go have some fun in Vegas. So we'd go get a booth and support that show. But it died in a slow, ugly death. And then they finally stopped doing it. Right. So I don't know what they thought when they thought they were going to move the big show to Vegas, because it just didn't work.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard it, because it was literally announced like this morning, but Midwest Haunters is now moving here to Northwest Indiana area, Upper Illinois area. So
yeah, I'd heard they were going to move it to Chicago. Is that not where they're going?
Yeah.
Supposedly Schaumburg.
Schaumburg.
One of the suburbs.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually did a little convention for a couple of seasons called Chicago Frights that was there in Chicago.
We were there.
Yeah, I couldn't get the haunts to support us, so we just stopped doing it. Now obviously that would make that difficult, but I don't understand why would you move it from Ohio? There are more haunts. There are a lot of haunts in Ohio. There are a lot of haunts in Chicago. But there are a lot of haunts in Ohio, and Midwest Haunters was doing great until Transworld bought it, and then it just kind of, and part of that is the personality of the owner of the haunt. The convention always has the personality of the owner. If you're all about business, money, that's what your trade show is going to be. That's the feeling that your trade show is going to be about. If you're, ours is HauntCon is all about education. You don't pay extra to do education at HauntCon. It's included in the price of getting in the show. So right. You're not paying, $80 per seminar, at HauntCon, like you do at Transworld. I've always felt like education should be free, because, the more we can train people, the more we can teach people to do what they do better, cheaper, they're going to, eventually buy more stuff make more money and buy more stuff from my vendors, and it's all going to come back, trickle down the long way. But but Transworld is the 900-pound gorilla in the room. They're the one. They have all the clout. All of the vendors go to that. If you're only going to be able to go to one show a year, then Transworld is definitely the one to go. But if you got some time, you got some money in January, HauntCon is a great opportunity, because it's a much more friendly show. It's a much more personable show, and the education is free. And no matter how hard Transworld tries, they can't beat our education, and they really never have been able to.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I almost think that the classes at Midwest Haunters are better than the classes at Transworld, because a lot of times, like, our owner doesn't. It's hard to get him to take a class at Transworld, because he's taken so many where it's like a sales pitch or just something like that,
and it's to pay $80 for a sales pitch. Right. At least at HauntCon, if you go into a seminar, and the guy's all he's doing is pushing his services, you can get up and walk to the next seminar.
Right.
Transworld, when you paid $80 for that, you can't do that, and it's I never have understood that.
Yeah, I've walked out of classes I've paid for just because I'm at a point now where I've got experience in haunted houses. Obviously, I'm not like an old school haunter by any means, but I've watched so many things. I've listened to so many people that if so I know if I take a class with like Alan Hops, I know I'm going to get some good information out of that class. And there's a few people who I know if I take their class, I'll get great information out of it. But then I see like over and over again, like they'll have the same people running the same class year after year with a new name. But if you read what it's about, it's the same class, the same pictures, the same everything. And I can understand if you do that like maybe twice or every other year. So if you missed it last year, you can kind of take it this year. But it gets to a point where it's old. And then if I take a class with someone I've never heard of, and I'm hoping it's good, and then I'm in there, like I took a class on sliding once, on knee pads and all that. And I'm in the class, and I've been sliding since we opened. So I've learned all kinds of lessons just the hard way, from ending up hurt and what works, and doing as much research as I can online. And then I'm in this class, and these guys have been sliding less time than I have and are asking me questions, or like the audience will ask a question and now I have to answer it because these guys don't know. And I don't know, that just blows my mind. And I've definitely walked out of classes because the whole time I'm weighing, am I learning something here, or am I just hanging out here because I paid money and I'm wasting time that I could be out at the trade show, kind of running my mind through everything I see and coming up with rooms and talking with our crew and creating concepts and stuff. So
well, and that's one of the mistakes we made with HauntCon. You know, we had with HauntCon, the HauntCon education has always been stellar, but we got into a lull where we weren't going advanced. You know, we brought the entire industry up to a certain level of education with the seminars that we were doing, and we kept doing new seminars, but they were still at the same level. The mistake we made was not going advanced. You know, not going, now we've got everybody to this level, now we need to take them to the next level. And that's what we've really been concentrating on in the last couple of years, is really not doing anything that's at a beginner level. Everything that we're doing is in a, at least an intermediary, if not advanced level, to make sure that people will come back, because people stopped coming. They would come to HauntCon for a couple of years, they would learn everything, and then they'd say, well, you know, we're not getting the information, you know, the new information of the advanced information that we need to take us to the next step. So that was a mistake that we made, and we're fixing that. We're increasing the number of seminars that we have scheduled, and we're definitely doing everything we can to take everything to an advanced level. And it's free. All you got to do is pay to get in the show.
there you go.
Do as many seminars as you want.
Right. So it sucks so bad that like the main focus of Transworld is business, and I never really experienced it until this year when we got there and they handed out their the flyers that say like, here's our dates of next year, and on it they let us know that next year at the same place at the same time they're having the Christmas attraction show, which I don't know. I'm not huge on it. I understand there's a lot of haunts that have a Christmas haunted house, but I feel like this is our show. And Christmas is kind of like the enemy. Like they get the radio stations, they get everything. Let us have our trade show. Leave me alone for a month. So, yeah.
Well, and that's a shame. I think you're just, when you do something like that, you're just asking for friction. You're just asking for, and there are a lot of people that do that do escape games. A lot of haunted house people are doing escape games, but when they started their escape game show, they split that off. Why isn't that at Transworld? Why isn't that in St. Louis at the same time as the other show? That would save a bunch of haunters from having to make 2 trips, so you don't have to go to that other show.
Well, they
Instead,
do
split
have
that
the
one up.
they do have like the escape room area,
Yeah.
but it's not its own show. I mean, there are some escape room classes and stuff.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear the feedback from everyone about what they think about like the Christmas show. 'Cause I'm also curious to see what kind of an audience that's going to draw, because I don't know of many. Like it's kind of opposite. So with haunted houses, you've got loads of like home haunts, you've got all kinds of stuff, like all kinds of haunts, and they're all kind of like a small business. Where with pro Christmas stuff, I mean, what's gonna come to the trade show? Is it malls, or is it? I mean, who does Christmas like that and goes to buy stuff that you can't just buy at Walmart?
That's a good point.
I'm just,
but
I don't know. I'm
you
curious
can't buy
about
it also. And
Right.
that's something else. I mean, I'm assuming that this Christmas show is going to be a wholesale show.
I'd imagine, because it's
Otherwise,
happening with Transworld.
What's the
So
point?
right,
Transworld isn't a wholesale show. There's the people that are selling props and masks and that kind of stuff at Transworld. What you're paying retail price. You're not. Nobody's selling those, silicone masks at $400 a pop and then selling them in their store for $800 a pop.
right,
Which 100% is the typical markup on a retail.
right.
That Transworld is not a wholesale show. They might like to think they are, but they're not.
Right.
They claim they're not cash and carry either. But if you buy a mask on the floor, they'll let you carry it home.
Really? That's interesting. I mean, I never heard that they weren't. I've always bought stuff in a cash and carry away, and actually, I think next year I won't, unless it's something very small that I can hide in like my trunk. Because last year, and by last year I mean in March, we had bought a bunch of stuff. We spent hundreds of dollars on blood and all this stuff. And when we left the trade show, so right after we had loaded up our car with all of our stuff, they went to a restaurant to eat before they left the town, and their car was broken into. They used a rock or hammer, whatever, and broke our window and just stole all kinds of bags, and everything was in bags or boxes. So they were just grabbing stuff. It's not like they knew I'm taking blood. They just they grabbed a box and weren't impressed when they were at home, and it was 5 gallons of fake blood. So
serves them right in a way, but it really is sad. Yeah, St. Louis is not a friendly town. I mean, it's a rough place to live. I can understand somebody leaving a car overnight and getting broken into. I can't imagine somebody going in to eat.
Oh, it was in broad daylight.
Yeah, this was in the trade show, it closes early on the last day, and they had left early. This had to be at like noon. I mean, it wasn't like it was late at night either. It was right across from like a campus of like a college too. So it's not like it was a barren neighborhood or anything. I don't know. It's just crazy. And it was 2 years ago. I got hit in a T-bone, and they just drove off, hit and run. And the whole time I was there at that hotel, the cops never came. I called them multiple times. They never just didn't come, because it was, I guess, just a waste of their time or something. So that was great. But
yeah, no, fortunately, him and we had to stick around and do other business, because like I had a $300 pig prop in the back. I had a staff for my own personal character that was worth over $100, not to mention my laptop that, has my regular work stuff along with a bunch of haunt stuff on it. And then he had a bunch of stuff. So, I mean, fortunately, not everything got stolen, but still, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, and it was also just like a lot of personal stuff of theirs. Like they just grabbed all kinds of luggage and stuff. So whatever else that was in there that wasn't haunted house stuff was also just gone. So that sucked. But anyway, we're way off its topic. So after HauntCon, where'd you kind of grow or obviously not after HauntCon because you're still involved in HauntCon, right?
Yeah, and we sold it last year, so we don't
Okay.
own it anymore. So
Really?
we sold it to Halloween and Party Expo, which is interesting because it's the people that split off from
Transworld.
Transworld because of the friction that was being caused by the haunters not being wholesale buyers, and
Right.
then when they moved to Houston and then now to New Orleans, they wanted us back. They really missed the energy. They really missed the cool new ideas that the haunted house people were coming up with. And so the people that owned Halloween and Party Expo, they had just recently purchased it, but everyone was talking about how they wanted to have the haunters come back. And so they came to us and asked us if we would sell it. Transworld actually tried to buy it from us or they said that they were interested, but they never would give me a price. They wanted me to open my books up and show them what we made. And it was like, if you're going to buy me, you're buying me as a nuisance. Tell me what that's worth to you to buy HauntCon and kill it. And I really never felt good with that because I don't think it's good for one company to own everything. I mean, Transworld owns Midwest, they own Transworld, they own their legendary haunt tour thing that they're doing. They own the escape game convention. It's just not good for one company to own everything.
Right.
So when the Halloween and Party Expo people came to me, and what was interesting was in 2013, we were doing this. We were doing HauntCon in Dallas, and my wife and I had talked about it, and we said, the reason we started HauntCon was because Transworld wasn't listening to us. Transworld looked like the Halloween and Party Expo does now, when we started HauntCon. And if Transworld had looked like what it does now, there would have been no reason for us to start HauntCon, because now they've really embraced the haunted house industry, and they really have taken our ideas and taken them to the next level. So my wife and I discussed it, and we kind of decided that we were just going to end. It was our 15th anniversary, I think. Maybe it was 10. We started in 2004, so it would have been it was our 10th anniversary. And we kind of decided that we weren't going to do HauntCon anymore. We were just going to close it up, and because Transworld was the big show, and then Jen Thaler she and I had always butted heads, because in her position was that I badmouth her show, and I don't badmouth Transworld. I don't sugarcoat anything, and if they do something that I disagree with, I'm going to mention it. I'm going to say something about it. And I think there are people out there that don't like me. There are a handful of people that have been trying to put me out of business for 15 years or 20 years. And I'm sure and those people kind of have her ear, and I'm sure anything that was said came back to her with venom. But in 2013, I had hired an advertising group to do some advertising for HauntCon, and they had polled a bunch of vendors. They polled a whole bunch of vendors, and the vendor and they came up and they polled them asked them about all the different shows and what they thought of all the different shows. And so they took some negative things that the vendors had said about Transworld and about Midwest as well, and they put that in an email, and they forwarded it to me, and they said, "Is this okay to send out?" And I didn't say it was okay, but our brand new sales rep at the time also got a copy of that, and she said, "Yeah, it looks great." And so they send out this email. So the first time I saw it was when I got it in my inbox, not as they send it out to everybody.
Right.
And I knew that was going to be a problem, because Transworld had always said that I slam their show. And it doesn't make any sense for me to slam their show. I mean, first off, Leonard Pickel, there's nothing that Leonard Pickel can do to damage Transworld. You know, they're the 900-pound gorilla in the room, but they're also the bully. There's no reason for them to be the bully, because when they got this email, they immediately threw me out of Transworld. And so for the last 6 Transworlds, I've been not allowed to go onto the trade show floor or go into the education or anything that Transworld is doing in St. Louis. We still go to St. Louis because all my friends are there. Why wouldn't I go to see them? And I meet with clients and do whatever else I need to do. But I've been banished from their show because I'm such an evil guy for 6 years. And, you know, I've really kind of taken the high road on that. I mean, I really haven't come out. I mean, she's really kind of removed all reason for me not to say bad things about her show now, because I can't even go into it. But I really have taken the high road and not gone that way.
Right.
But it is getting pretty old. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's really kind of petty, and we've sold HauntCon now. I don't even own HauntCon anymore, so there's really no reason for me to slam her show, which I never really did anyway. But so I've been banished. And so if you wonder why you haven't seen me at Transworld in a while, it's because I'm not allowed. And if you want to see me, we're in the hotels and hanging out and talking with our friends. And but you're gonna have to call me and make an appointment because I'm not allowed on the show floor.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's what I saw a few years ago and that's why I asked you if it was like, all right, if I asked you about it, because I saw that and I wasn't aware that they had banned you or had not let you have a booth there in the past. But yeah, I saw that you were like across the street at the hotel.
Yeah, I think I remember talking to Timmer, and he said something about you being over there. He's like, you want to get some free information, go and talk to him. He'll tell you anything you want to know.
Yeah, but no, that's interesting.
It's her show, and if she doesn't want me in her show, that's fine. But it is getting pretty old. I think I've paid my dues for what her damage that she thinks that I've done, and it's time to get over it, I think.
Right. I feel like, see, you can't be like that, because I'm of the mindset that I'm of a mindset like Alan Hops. I post my vlogs every day. I put whatever knowledge I have out there on the internet. People can watch it, rewatch it. They can download it, have it on their phones, whatever, watch it on an airplane, whatever you want to do. And I'll answer any question anyone has, because I didn't like it when I was younger and I didn't know what I know now, and I would ask people questions and I would get either just pushed aside because they have more important stuff, or they wouldn't answer it because it's like they think that like the kid is going to outplay them in their own game, so they don't want to let him have like the secrets. So now I give everything to everyone, and I'm of a mindset just like Alan Hops, that I'll give you my information. If you're better than me, you'll do it better, or you'll teach me a better way to do it, and we'll both be much better off. So I think Transworld should let you there. You have so much knowledge, having you running classes. I mean, everything. It should be about improving the industry, not improving the trade show. But of course, for them, they're a business, so they have to. So I understand it, but at the same time, it's like you have to think about the people that are coming to your show. If otherwise, you won't have those people coming to your show. And I miss a lot of the stuff that was there when like the first year I came, and the few years after that. Like I've mentioned it on Haunter's Hangout a few times. I've mentioned it on other places. Like I miss when they would have their interactive haunted house, because I love any time I can walk through any kind of haunted house, because it's someone else's creative mind that I'm walking through, and I love that. But they would have where the vendors would use their props in some kind of a walkthrough to put their props in a scene, and they stopped it when they started with the escape room stuff, and they just really started this rapid expansion of vendors and escape rooms and Christmas and anyone else they could get that could make a dime. I've been there probably 8 years, I think 8 or 9 years now, and the first year I went, the trade show was like half of what it is now, and the other half of that huge room had a zip line on it because there was nothing over there. So they ran this giant line that you could climb up, and it was like a free charge. You could just fly down this thing. But that just shows how much like empty space where all of the escape room stuff is now, and every other thing that's over there in that area where I hardly walk because it's not helping me, at least with my ideas. So I don't know. It's just they definitely should. Hopefully they hear this and they're like, oh, let's let Leonard Pickel come and make this a better show for everyone involved. That'd be great. So,
Well, it's their loss. I mean, people will pay money to see me speak. So now
right.
if you want to see me speak, you have to go to HauntCon or I used to speak every year at Midwest Hunters Convention. So when they bought that, they stopped me from being able to speak there. So they, I'll speak anywhere anyone will let me, and
obviously
people. I mean, it's usually a packed room. So I have something to offer. But if you want to see me speak, your best chance is at HauntCon because it's not going to be at Transworld,
right,
or West Coast or Midwest rather. We speak of
West
Coast. Speak
who
of West
runs,
Coast.
I've never heard about like who runs that show.
Ed Roberts. He's it's interesting because he was a guy that would come to HauntCon every year, but he has a bunch of his haunt is for the School of the Deaf. He does a haunt for a bunch of deaf kids that live on his property, or the ones that put the haunt together. So they use it kind of like as an outreach, kind of like what we were talking about before for those kids.
Right.
And he wanted to, and for 1 year, he flew all the kids to a HauntCon, wherever it was, so that they could see everything. And he said, we just can't afford that every year. So instead of flying my kids to HauntCon, I'm going to create a convention that's going to be up here in Portland. And so my kids can come to it, because otherwise they can't do it. So he created, really, it was HauntCon's fault that West Coast Haunters was created, because he wanted the kids to be able to experience that, and he just couldn't afford to fly them in and out every year.
Right.
Now, how does that show compare to like a Transworld, Midwest Hunters, or your own? How is that show different? Because like we've never been able to go to that one because obviously it's on the West Coast. And same thing with HauntCon.
Yeah, it's smaller than Midwest. Its show floor, it's actually trade show floor, is about the size of HauntCon's, maybe even a little bit bigger sometimes. But they have a lot of free booths that they give to people. Sometimes they'll just have homeowners that'll come in and decorate a booth, just to fill up the space. Education is free, kind of like it is with us. I think you pay a fee for their education package, kind of like Midwest used to be. It's a great show. I go every year. I speak when they let me. There's a lot of, really. I mean, it's a great, very personable show. Again, it has the personality of the people that operate it and run it. Davis Graveyard is always there doing incredible workshops, and so it's kind of. It was kind of a HauntCon mini me when it started, I guess, and it grew up to be something that's sizable. But they take the best ideas from everybody, like everyone does, and present them, and it's a fun show. We go every year.
Yeah, I think I watched there's these haunters out there who also vlog. I think they were like the first haunted house vloggers, but I think that was the show they were at, and they did like a dark zone, and they took a bunch of local haunters and they all made like these mini haunts in there. So there was like
that's Scare LA. That's in
Okay,
Los
okay,
Angeles.
okay.
And then
Yeah.
they have. Do they do that at? Do they do that at? There's two shows, in LA. One is called Midsummer Scream, and the other one is
Right.
Scare Away.
Right.
Scare Away was the first one to do the little mini haunts, but I think both of them are doing it now. Maybe just Midsummer Scream. Maybe Midsummer Scream is the only one that's doing it now. But yeah, that's a great thing, and I wish we could figure out how to do that at HauntCon. It really is fun. You have
Yeah.
some local people come in and do some to build a little a 4-room haunt or something.
Right. Right.
That let people go through it, and it's all free at Midwest. So it's it's pretty cool. I've been to that several times, and it's interesting. They're all kind of a little bit. Sometimes they're a little off the wall, and California is all into that experience stuff. It's all into that mind games, and a lot of the haunts out there are that's where the Alone experience started, and it's where the Blackout haunt. I think there's one of those in New York and one of those in LA.
Yeah, I've always said that those places, like, to me, those are not haunted houses. I think I've heard them. I've never heard them called haunted houses by anyone other than the people who don't know what it is. Anyone else I've ever heard who talks about it, they call it. That wasn't me.
That was me.
Anyway, way to go. Anyway, anyone else I've ever heard explain those, they call it a fear experience.
Right.
Because the thing about haunted houses is that it's always the same kind of thing, and we all know that no matter how much we say, like, we're hardcore, man, and we go all out, man, like, if you do that and you terrify a person, they're gonna hate your show, because it's the same thing every time. They walk in a room, they're nervous, you jump out, you scare them, then they laugh. But if you don't get that laugh, which is what I think happens at these crazy things where they're like naked and it's in some weird abandoned building and all these other things that are happening, to me it's just kind of like, it's almost like a weird kind of a fetish of trying to see, like, how far can I go, or how far can I push myself to get some kind of a crazy high off of fear. Because if there's no payoff, it's just like on a roller coaster. I've always said that, like, those rides where it lifts you up real slow, real high, and then it's just one drop and the ride's over. Those rides are not fun because there's no, like, up and down action. There's nothing. It's just like raise up real slow. You're really scared. A drop, it's scary, it's over. But like a roller coaster, you raise up real slow, you drop down, you're scared in that drop, you've got that crazy feeling, and then you raise up again. And it's kind of like, here it comes again. It's faster. You have that same laugh that happens after you get scared in a haunted house. So.
No, I'd agree with that.
Mm-hmm. And
there's,
in these places,
there's
like,
some of them that are even worse. I mean, there's some of them that are really almost torture.
Right. And I don't understand
the whole thing about going to a haunted house, in my opinion, is, I mean, it's really a date thing. People go to haunted houses in groups of friends, usually that are 50% male, 50% female. And then sometimes there's groups of guys and sometimes there's groups of girls, but usually it's dates that are going through a haunted house. And you really are, you really are trying, you want to see your friends' reactions.
Exactly.
It doesn't, going through the haunted house by yourself is kind of silly. First off, the capacity is horrible. You can't get any numbers, which means it's hard to make money. And you don't get to see anybody else's reactions, and nobody else gets to see your reactions.
Exactly.
So it kind of defeats the purpose of.
Yeah, and that's the same reason I've always wondered, like, about those guys that walk through, like, nothing scares me. This is stupid. You're just a kid in a mask. It's like, really? Like, you didn't know that when you bought a ticket?
When you bought a ticket.
Yeah. Like, you're not playing along, so you're not going to have have fun with me. I'm sorry, but you probably won't enjoy this no matter what I do, whether I try and make you laugh. You're just in there to be a badass. So thank you for all of your badass money. Enjoy your bad night.
Right. Yeah, that's the guy that I target. That's the one that I try to startle.
Right.
And you have to be entertaining, and that's where theme and setting, and I mean, some of the elite haunted houses in the country are really high in the detail, and you don't need all of that to scare people. But the people that you can't scare, are the people that are really going through that are not going to be frightened no matter what you do, at least giving them that kind of level of stuff to look at, it makes them feel like they got their money's worth, and it gets rid of that
right.
This sucks, when they're walking by your ticket booth, which really hurts.
Yeah, right.
So and we're not going to name any names, but would you say these extreme haunted houses that are just out there doing crazy shit, they're putting blood in people's mouths and, pulling out teeth, things like that. Do you think that they should honestly be classified a different way? Because I know it's like especially on Hunters Hangout, that seems to be the conversation, is everybody's like, that should not be a haunted house. Because honestly, I think it gives us a bad name. I mean, would you be in agreement with that?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it shouldn't exist. It should exist. So there are people out there that want that experience. I have no problem with it.
Obviously.
I just feel like it hurts the haunt industry because they're trying to say that they are what they are when they're really something completely different.
Even they try to say that they're not a haunted house. And the problem is haunted house doesn't even fit what we're doing. I mean, the reality is most of the haunted houses that you go through aren't going to have a ghost in them. They're going to have slashers or clowns or something.
Lots of bad people.
Right, but they're not going to have. They're not really ghosts. So that even haunted house is not the right name for us either. It's just something that started and stuck. So so that doesn't fit us, but it certainly doesn't fit somebody who's really just trying to cause mental anguish and and I understand the rite of passage and feeling like you're tough. I mean, how many times have I cringed when I saw a parent dragging some little kid through my haunted house saying it's going to make a man out of him, when I know that kid is never going to go to a haunted house again as long as he lives. You lose him as a patron.
Lost a customer, yeah.
Right, because he's never going to go to a haunted house if you drag him through it before he's ready. So but yeah, I think, and as there is a blurring of the lines between escape games and haunted houses and alone experiences and blackout, as there's a blurring between all of these things, there probably does need to be a better classification that would separate us from the ones that are just trying to beat people up.
Right. So we're kind of wrapping up here. So I'm curious, what are you working on now?
Well, I have a client in New York State, and I've got a client that's supposed to be in Atlanta. We'll see if he can sign off on it. He's got the proposal. I've got a client that's in Australia that I've worked with several years in a row. I mean, I'm just designing haunted houses and got a couple other weird off the wall things that people have approached me about that I'm doing. And, I'm just living the dream.
I was trying to say that.
Coming up with the concept of scaring people, I've always looked for a job that I, was that they had to unlock the door for me in the morning so I could come in, and had to throw me out at night because I wanted to do it and do more of it. And haunted house design is the only thing that I've come close to feeling that way about. So that's what I do.
Nice. I'm curious, what was it like working at the asylum? Because it was a real asylum, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, it was so funny because everybody was freaking out that they were, because they thought the thing was really haunted. And
real quick, just so everyone knows like what I'm talking about, it was at Penhurst Asylum, right?
No. The one that I did was in New York, and I don't even it was like Lyndhurst, I think.
Okay.
But it was yeah, and what was cool about it was that I am a true skeptic because I can make stuff move. I can make noises. I can make a cold spot. I've always wanted to design a haunted bed and breakfast. Where it was just really a hotel, and and stuff was happening that no one could explain, and you could literally take the thing apart and not figure out how it worked. But
Yeah, I've thought about that for years too.
I would kill to do that. It'd be so much fun.
Mhm.
I'd love to own that. But so in this, I don't believe in ghosts. My wife does. She even we were in a hotel one time on our way to Transworld, and we were getting up and trying to get going, and she was all grumpy, and I asked her what her problem was, and she said, I saw a ghost last night. And it's just like, and you didn't wake me up? What the heck? So
I wanted to meet him.
yeah, well, I mean, give me a break. But I don't. I'm just not a believer. And there were some places there was one place in the building that I kept walking by this door, and when I walked by the door would move. And so I started looking at it to try to figure out what it was that was making it do that, and it was the floor. The door had a closer on it, but the floor had warped up and was wedged just slightly underneath the door. So as you walked by, if you stepped on the right spot, the door would close on you. It would actually almost slam on you. And so I just had a blast, because every time I was walking through somebody through on a tour, I did it with a reporter that was going through getting a story on the place. And so I'm telling her about this haunted hallway that every time I walk by, this door slams on me, and I could get it timed where I could make it slam on her right when she walked by. And I was just having a grand old time. These people were totally freaking out, just totally free. I did it to one of the workers, and he refused to come back. He just left and said, "No, I'm done. I'm not coming back."
We're sick.
I know. People deserve it. I love scaring people. They deserve it.
Yeah, I've always thought that, like, I've met a lot of people who hit this trap where they get this really, really cool building. They're like, oh, it was a real prison, or, whatever it was. And I always think, like, that's great. Good luck making a haunted house in that.
Right.
So was that a problem there, or was it weird or anything?
It was a little bit strange, and we had to do some real, it took some creative pathing to make the thing work. They had an elevator, which I thought was really cool. We used the elevator as part of the scene, as part of the pathway, and then it came down and went to one level, and then as soon as the doors opened, there were actors in there. They're like a zombie horde that was attacking the people in the elevator, and then the guy in the elevator would fight them off and close the doors so they could go down to the basement, which is where the storyline had the mass murderer guy lived, or his ghost was. So it took some creativity to make all that work, but no, it was fun, and it was being able to do something that was in an old house, and instead of just throwing up plywood walls, we did stuff and put crown molding and all kinds of cool stuff on it to make it look like it was original, and so that was kind of fun.
Awesome. Well, I think we're about out of time here, man. So I want to say thank you very much. It's been a hell of a show. We didn't even do a lot of talking because you've got so much stuff to tell, but I loved it. And if you're still interested, our listeners, sorry, I'm used to our vlog, but our listeners would probably love to know that we have planned a class that is yet to be announced, that you'll be running on here. It'll kind of run the same way. You'll run the class, and we'll kind of give any input that we have, sure, and kind of a conversation with you leading a class at the same time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and the one that I've chosen for this is Haunt Design Do's and Don'ts. So
awesome.
It's avoiding common errors that decreases your effectiveness and your capacity and stuff. So it's a nice little class. I've given it before, and it's well received. So I think that'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see, if we're how we're going to pull this off. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Where there's a will, there is a way, and I have a hell of a will. So we'll make it work.
Especially when haunters are involved.
Oh yeah, I've got plenty of duct tape and zip ties. We'll make it happen. So, perfect. All right. Thank you very much. It's been a hell of a show, and you have a great night.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.